There are 5 things that I've realised are too often left out of conversations about rebranding yourself. So if you are thinking about rebranding yourself or evolving your personal brand, or perhaps a life event has been the catalyst for you to think about rebranding yourself, then grab a cup of tea and let's dive into it. If you know me personally, or if you have tuned into any of my previous episodes, then you might have noticed that something has changed, and that is my last name. I recently got married and I have changed my name from Diane Baruch to Diane Glavash. And as a part of that process, I want to reflect on what changing my name made me realize about rebranding yourself and some of the key things that I feel are too often not discussed when it comes to rebranding yourself. I've worked in marketing and branding for 15 years and I now work as a personal brand coach. And I understand that sometimes life events or a change in goals causes you to feel like you need to rebrand yourself. But if you've tuned into this episode already, I imagine that I don't need to convince you about some of the benefits of rebranding yourself. If you want to learn more about my top tips for rebranding yourself, then make sure to check out my previous episode on rebranding yourself. In that episode, I shared 9 tips. To recap what my initial core tips were, it was to number 1, time your personal brand rebrand. Number 2, you can take your old personal brand into your new personal brand. Number 3 is establish clear goals for your personal brand rebrand. Number 4 was research your personal brand rebrand. Number 5 was rename yourself. Number 6 was rebrand your personal brand visual identity. Number 7 was rebrand your personal brand's verbal identity. Number 8 was be consistent, not comfortable. And number 9 was prime your audience for your personal brand rebrand. So make sure you tune into that episode after this one. But in the meantime, let's get into the 5 things that I think we need to discuss further when it comes to rebranding yourself. My first tip is aspiration over authenticity. If you are someone who is thinking about rebranding yourself, or if life has put you in a position to reconsider rebranding yourself, then I'm going to suggest that you give a little bit more thought to the idea of aspiration over authenticity. Authenticity has officially become a buzzword. If you didn't hear already, it was Merriam-Webster's Word of the Year for 2023. I have a whole other episode on why I think authenticity can sometimes be used as an excuse when it comes to evolving your personal brand. And a lot of this comes back to the idea of a fixed versus growth mindset. When you have a fixed mindset, you generally believe in natural born talent and that your skills are inherited and don't necessarily change over time. But when you believe in a growth mindset, you believe that your skills can be developed over time and that it's your efforts that are going to have the most impact on your results. So when it comes to rebranding yourself, I think there is something really nice in thinking beyond your current circumstances and not restricting your thinking to the way things have always been, and to actually develop a mindset that strives beyond your current circumstances, because your current circumstances have only been able to get you so far. So if you are thinking about rebranding yourself, then it's likely that you're going to have to think about what the things are that need to change, even if some of these things don't necessarily feel authentic to you at the time. Changing my name has been both a surreal and exciting experience. Your name is probably the foundation of your personal brand identity. It's likely what you most associate with. So for me, having to detach myself from something that I have had my whole life was a little bit of an emotional journey. But I really wanted to be able to show myself that I could enter this new chapter of my life and that I could develop this growth mindset as to how exciting that was and all of the opportunities that presented to embrace this new version of myself. So whether you are changing your name or entering a new chapter of your life that has you thinking about rebranding yourself, then I hope that you will think about all of the opportunities that this presents for you. And this leads nicely into tip number 2, which is to let go of your ego. It is never easy letting go of past identities. And even when it comes to personal branding and all of the effort that you might put into how you represent yourself, it is also really important to understand that those things aren't necessarily the core of who you are and everything that you represent or all of the potential that you might be able to become in the future. Being too attached to constructed identities, whether it is your name, your title, the organization that you work for, your physical attributes, or your talents and your skills, is rarely ever a good thing. It is good to be able to appreciate those things to the full extent without feeling that you have to be attached to them. This idea of detachment is prominent in Stoic philosophy. And I think Ryan Holiday in The Ego is the Enemy sums this up beautifully when he says detachment is a sort of natural ego antidote. Remember that when it comes to rebranding yourself, your ego is probably going to want to hold on to some of your past identities. But remember that your ego is not who you actually are. Tip number 3 is to really ask yourself who this rebrand allows you to be. When I defined my previous tips on rebranding yourself, one of them was to establish clear goals. When it comes to my own personal brand vision or goals in general, I always like to set some really big and clear goals. But there was one thing that I realized through this personal transformation journey that I hadn't had on the list at all, and that was learning a second language. It was not on my radar of anything that I actually thought I would be able to achieve in this lifetime. While I loved the idea of learning a second language, I felt like it was something that I have never been particularly good at, and therefore amongst all the other interests and hobbies that I had, I thought that maybe that would have to be one that would not make it to my list. When my husband migrated from Europe to Australia, he did not speak any English. His first language was Serbian, and while he speaks perfect English today, I realized that by marrying him and entering into this new chapter together, this was an opportunity to learn what his first language was, to learn his family's language. So since being married, I've spent some time prioritizing learning Serbian because I think that it is something that is going to be really special to bring into this new chapter of our lives together. So when it comes to your own rebrand, remember to not just think about the what, why, when, and how of it all. Don't just think about how it's going to sound and look, but think about how you can actually ask yourself who this rebrand allows you to be. You may have a different interest outside of learning a second language. Ask yourself, what are the interests or hobbies that this person that you want to rebrand to has? I have a whole other episode about becoming high value with hobbies if you want to learn any more about that. And this leads nicely into tip number 4, which is to let go of your limiting beliefs. If I was being true to my authentic self or to my limiting beliefs, I never would be attempting to learn a second language. As I mentioned, it was never something that I felt I was good at. During high school and even in early school, while I enjoyed it to some degree, I didn't really feel like it was something that I excelled in, which is why I didn't have an interest in it in my adult life. However, now learning a second language has become one of my favorite parts of my day. So when it comes to your own rebrand, what limiting beliefs or limiting decisions might actually be holding you back from your potential? And how can you let go of those previous assumptions about yourself? My tip number 5 is to get visual with your personal brand vision. In my previous tips, I suggested doing research on your personal brand, but I want to be even more specific about this and to actually create a visualization of how that looks. And one of my favorite ways to do this that I think is so underrated is using Pinterest. I have used Pinterest for many, many years. I've always used it to research things that I was interested in and create mood boards as such around things that I might have been looking for or interested in at the time. More recently though, I have started to use Pinterest with much more of a focus on vision boarding very specifically. So if I want to eat healthier, for example, I have a very specific vision board about that. If I want to practice yoga more often, I have a vision board for that too. If I want to play the piano more often, I have a vision board for that as well. So when it comes to your own personal brand, how are you creating a visualization of exactly how this looks? Visualization, as it's understood in neurolinguistics programming, argues that your mind has trouble differentiating between what is vividly imagined and what is real life experiences. So by creating really specific visualizations, then you allow yourself to rewire your brain to engage your emotions and behaviors to be aligned with your goals. This becomes a form of mental rehearsal that is going to help to put you closer to your personal brand vision. However the opportunity presents itself to you, could you use a rebrand? And what new world of possibilities might this create? Thanks so much. Subscribe for more like this, and I'll see you in the next episode.